Hello again. This is the video for Chapter 1. We're going to talk about data versus information and perhaps getting into metadata. We'll see. I hope to cover that in the next 3 minutes anyway. So again, you should have gone into Blackboard, Course Documents, Chapter 1, opened up the PowerPoint presentation. This section really kind of starts at slide 3 where we talk about data and information and metadata. So going on to slide 4, this is what a raw data comma separated file would look like. This is the kind of stuff that COBOL, an old programming language, used to deal with. So in this case, you've got basically raw data. This doesn't tell you a whole heck of a lot. It's information about something. If you did not know these were students, it would be difficult to determine that simply from looking at this data. These could be social security numbers, right? If you look at this for a while, you can kind of determine that, yep, this first, whatever is before the first comma looks like a last name, then it looks like a first name. These could be middle initials. Looking at Michael Cisneros, it doesn't look like Michael has a middle initial, so that would be a blank in that column. We'll talk about that later on when we talk about more data. So say these are IDs or social security numbers. Right off you can't tell whether or not this is their major, but it is, and it's obviously a code. It's not the full description of what their major is. And then this number, you can say that, well, it might be their GPA, right? So again, looking at this is raw data. The format of this makes it easier to work with, like programming software like COBOL, would need to know that, all right, the very first column, anything before the first comma is the last name, and then the next piece of information is the first name, then the next piece of information is the middle initial. So you would have to define that. The problem is that if you have to make changes to this structure, you also have to change your program, and that was one of the problems. So going on to slide 5, if you look in the textbook and you're looking at the figure 1-1, which we'll look at again in a second on page 6, the data or the file associated with what that class roster is based on would look something like this. You see a lot of repeated information. Management 500 Business Policy is the name of the course. This is the section 2. It's being offered during the spring 2010 semester. And again, then we get into each individual student's information. So this data is formatted for class roster, which makes the data easy to use for the report that we're going to see on slide 6. All right, so in this report, I need to know for each student that they're associated with this course during the spring 2010 semester, that they're in section 2, and then I can actually display their information. You'll notice that in this case, the student's name is not broken out into 3 separate pieces, last name, first name, middle initial. In this case, the name is one piece of information. Also note the quotation marks. Quotation marks usually denote the fact that we're using text data. When you see a value such as the 2, that means that's numeric data. The ID is numeric data. The GPA is numeric data. All the other information is what's known as text data. And then quickly, if we take that raw data and we go one level further, we can have what's known as summarized data. And this is more reporting purposes. This is more information that would be used by a chair of a department, for instance. And then the last part of this is metadata. So it's really a description describing this file. So I'm going to flash between slide 5 and slide 8. So here we've got course, which is alphanumeric whose length is 30. So if we flash back to slide 5, you can see that MGT 500 business policy, hopefully this is all less than 30 characters because that's what the metadata tells us. It gives us a description. When we get to section, it's an integer, it's a length of 1. So when you look at this, you couldn't have a section like 12, all right, because that would require 2 spaces. We don't have that available to us when we look at the metadata. That's an integer, it's a min, and the max is 9. All right, and we'll talk about restrictions of data later. Semester is alphanumeric, name is alphanumeric, the ID is integer, as the student ID or the SSN, and obviously those aren't real social security numbers. The major is alphanumeric, and the GPA. So this is what's known as metadata. These are descriptions or the properties or characteristics of the data. All right, and you can see that in the slide. It's the data types, the field sizes, the allowable values, which is the mins and the maxes for the numbers, and the context of the data. All right, so you can kind of flash between 5 and 8. And that would be the end of the video associated with data versus information and metadata.